As an American, imagine going to the doctor and being told you need immediate surgery and you get your hospital stay, your surgery, and your medicine for free. You can't imagine that, can you? I've been noticing a lot on conservative media trying their darndest to paint Luigi Mangione as this villain, and they're losing because the everyday common man feels vindicated by the premise of what this murder was. It was the precipice of the everyday man not feeling heard, seen, or taken care of by the systems in place of the country that we live in. There's absolutely no reason that America shouldn't have Medicare for all. With as rich as we are, with as many resources as we have, and as much as we spend on actual healthcare a year. More particularly with healthcare. I'm gonna share two stories with you guys about my personal experience with healthcare in and out of America. I went to grad school in London. I went to LSE, and I lived in a town called Angel, which is in East London. And right next to my house, I used to pass it every day, was this place called Moorfields Eye Hospital. I, at the time, as a 21-year-old, had really bad habits of taking my contacts out of my eye when I went to sleep. And at this particular time, I think I had them in for like 2 or 3 weeks. I wake up in the middle of the night, it feels like somebody is stabbing me in my eye with a needle, and I like freak out. So I wake up and I'm like, oh, let me walk to the eye hospital. Upon me arriving, I'm already nervous as an American because, first of all, at this point, my mother had still been doing all my doctor's appointments. I don't even know how to fill out insurance forms, and I'm newly in this country that I don't understand the system. They see me, it took them like 35 minutes. They see me, they put me under this like microscope thing. They look at my eye and they're like, we need to do immediate surgery on you. There's an amoeba in your eye and it is digging towards your cornea. Do you know what I say to the doctor? I say, hold on, let me call my mom because we have to figure out how much it's gonna cost. Can you imagine? So it's like 5 a.m. in the morning in New York. And so my mom picks up and so she talks to the doctor and I hear the doctor say, wow, I feel so sorry for you Americans. We're going to see your son. You don't have to give us your credit card. My mom was prepared to give him her Amex and spend $30,000 to $40,000 for whatever was going on. Needless to say, I got seen, I got the surgery, I got 2 days worth of hospital observation, I got 2 weeks worth of medicine. Do you know how much they charged me? £8, which at the time was the equivalent of 14 US dollars. 14 US dollars. Now, some will say, you know, there's obviously issues with the NHS and socialism and how sometimes it's inadequate to see all the people who are paying into that system. But me, as a foreigner on a visa, on a student visa, I had rights to that government healthcare. And imagine, bro, like, I'm scared to go get something. I could go blind and I'm worried about the cost of it versus them being able to see me. The second story I want to share with you guys is the one of my grandmother. My grandmother passed away in 2019. She had a series of strokes. The first hospital that saw her after she had her original stroke was kind of lollygagging around her treatment, around doing more tests, because something didn't kick in with her insurance. And because she was elderly, she was eligible for like a Series B or something of Medicare. And between the red tape the insurance company was giving us and the lag of what the government was actually doing with them, my grandmother had a series of 3 strokes. And the hospital, instead of actually doing the test that she needed, wanted prior authorization from the healthcare. The healthcare was saying that they couldn't give prior authorization because she actually was covered over here, and over here was taking time to give to this. So not only did my grandmother decline immensely, like she declined immensely. It was like she had a stroke and we were like, oh, she could come back. Then in the time that was needed for these treatments, she had a series of strokes because she declined, and then she unfortunately passed away. I shared those 2 stories to say, as an American, most of us don't even know how the rest of the world lives in terms of education and healthcare. And for us to be the richest country in the world and have the lowest percentage of education and have the lowest rate of education and life expectancy in the world makes absolutely no sense. At a certain point, the capitalistic greed and nature of our country has to give in, because yes, that fostered us growth, that fostered us through the Industrial Revolution, through the tech revolution, and now we're super rich. But at a certain point, you have to take care of your citizenry, and they're not doing it.
You know why I don't care that the CEO of United Healthcare was also a husband and father? My mom died from complications due to diabetes. Diabetes requires a lot of supply, not just things like pumps, insulin, needles, test strips. It's things like batteries, alcohol wipes, Band-Aids, tape, gauze. 6 months before my mom died, her health insurance let her know that all of the things that she had been prescribed and insured for the last 10, 15 years of her life were no longer going to be covered. The insulin her life depended on, the pumps her life depended on, and the batteries that go in those pumps. The morning after my mom died, and I'm talking not even 24 hours after, 7 a.m., the morning after my mom died, a box full of all of my mom's supplies for the next 4-6 months showed up on my front step. And inside the box, with all of her supplies, there was a letter that said, "Due to the change in your current situation, we have now fully insured and covered your supplies." The current change in situation was listed as death. Patient expiration. So yeah, it makes sense that all of the health insurance companies in the United States have now taken their CEOs off their websites, because it's not a matter of if this happens next, it's when.
Let's talk about the adjuster's disability and chronic illness, because I think that that's important to the story, especially after the last 5 years. I don't think a lot of you really have taken stock about what people with chronic illnesses and disabilities have gone through for the last 5 years. Luigi Mangione has plates and screws in his neck, it looks like, along his spine. And it has been stated multiple times by people who knew him in his manifesto, he is in a lot of pain. I also just saw a video from the daughter of, I don't want to say a doctor, where he says his entire body is filled with shit. Literally, like they did an x-ray of his body, it's filled with shit. Because he is on narcotics, he is constipated. And that probably adds to a lot of pain. It's also really important to recognize that he doesn't just have a disability or chronic illness, he has an invisible illness or an invisible disability. I have a visible disability and multiple chronic illnesses, but for people with invisible illnesses, it is especially harrowing to have people believe you. Believe you about your pain, believe you about what you're going through, and then to get the proper care that you deserve. People think that because he was wealthy, he had easy access to healthcare. I don't think that to be the case. Because the first hurdle is that people believe you. But then to go through the process of actually being believed and then getting the care you want and then having insurance deny coverage because, well, it's just a little neck ache. That can be frustrating and mentally deteriorating. I grew up watching my mom on a regular basis with insurance companies, on the phone with insurance companies, begging for coverage for my care. And this is at a time in which pre-existing conditions weren't necessarily covered. I had insurance throughout my childhood through my dad's insurance. And still, it was a hurdle to get the surgeries and treatments that I needed. And a lot of that came out of pocket. Yes, class does play a role in how people experience disability. I'm not even going to debate you all on that. However, it doesn't mean that every hurdle goes away. And one of the things that is very interesting about the disability community is the difference in socialization between people who are born with their disabilities and people who acquire the disabilities as they age. About 27% of the population has a disability in the United States, technically 27.2. That's according to the CDC. And about 1 in 5 people will develop a disability as they age. And what's really important to know about these numbers is that these are self-reported numbers, so that people have to disclose themselves whether or not they have a disability. So it can be far greater than that. Disabled people as a demographic of people are profit centers for the healthcare industry in multiple different ways. Private equity doesn't just own like regular healthcare that a layperson would interact with on a daily basis. Private equity owns care homes, long-term care, direct support providers, group homes, all of those things. Not to mention that disabled people are heavily surveilled everywhere, particularly if you want to partake in those services. In fact, in some states, if you're living off of income-based programs like Social Security income or Medicaid, the people who are sent to your home to verify whether you're living within your means are the police. The police. Not to mention that if you have a direct support provider, they are now tracking disabled people with GPS. There are even groups on Reddit and Facebook that are dedicated to posting pictures of real-life disabled people to speculate whether or not they're disabled in order to call Social Security and Medicaid to kick them off their benefits. Banks could put you in conservatorships and guardianships, and I personally know disabled people that keep track of court records in their state, in their county where they live, in order to suss out whether or not somebody's put them in a conservatorship or guardianship. At which point that person who puts them in a conservatorship or guardianship can then take all their assets and then pay themselves for the pleasure. there's a whole host of issues. Not to mention that disabled people are actively shunned from society through infrastructure. Places are not accessible. Through jobs. Jobs are really reluctant to provide accommodations a lot of the time, even if they are legally required. Depending on where you live, you may not have access to transportation because there's no paratransit. And as somebody who uses crutches, I've had Ubers and Lyfts drive right by me after seeing my crutches. Being disabled is a radicalizing process, and generally speaking, a lot of times disabled people within the disability community go one of two ways. Particularly if they become disabled in adulthood, they either become incredibly religious, which is ironic because churches and houses of worship are exempt from the ADA, or they become incredibly left-leaning because their entire life is dictated according to their access to healthcare and quite literally everything else, but especially healthcare now that they're a profit center for the healthcare industry. And again, this can happen to anyone, whether they are wealthy or poor. But especially as it pertains to becoming disabled in this country, the likelihood of you maintaining wealth while having a disability is very small. Because if you want state programs, if you want robust healthcare that is provided by state programs, you are forced into poverty a lot of the time. Many people are required to sell off their assets in order to qualify for these programs. And a lot of times you'll hear stories about people making 50 cents more and losing their access to healthcare, food stamps, housing vouchers, things like that. Oh, also, for a large portion of the disability community, you are allowed to be paid below the minimum wage because of the income requirements, which is actively tied, okay, I'm not to get on a tangent, but I talk about this all the time, and that is tied to the reason why we don't have a higher federal minimum wage, like at places like McDonald's, because the people against a higher minimum wage leverage the fact that disabled people can't make too much money to qualify for these programs. And because in legislation like Raise the Wage Act of 2019, they say to people, hey, you don't want to lose your benefits, you might as well protest against a higher federal minimum wage. Otherwise, you'll lose everything that keeps your life afloat. And that is how we have designed disability and healthcare in this country. So Luigi's story makes sense. Oh, one last thing, a reason why I mentioned the last 5 years. Private equity has gone on a rampage buying up all these services over the last 5 years, especially because with COVID, a mass disabling event, younger and younger people are probably going to be seeing nursing homes and care homes very soon.
We will finally get universal health care because of Luigi Mangione, mark my words. And I wanted to say this last week, but I don't want to be insensitive because what happened is awful. It is awful that somebody had to die in such a horrific way in order for the American public, our political system, for insurance companies to get scared enough and to realize that other countries have already figured this out. Other countries already know how to keep their citizens alive and safe without going bankrupt. We shouldn't have to die. We shouldn't have to lose our homes, be homeless on the street just to have health care. We deserve to live because after all, if we're a capitalistic society and you want us to go to work and make more money, we have to be healthy enough to go to work and make money. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that a wild concept? Like, oh my God, whoever thought of that? So yes, sometimes the revolution is ugly and bloody, and I think we all wish it didn't have to happen this way, but mark my words, because of Luigi Mangione, we're finally going to get universal health care in the United States. And it's about fucking time.
The degree to which a back injury and chronic back issues will radicalize a person is severely underestimated. The more we learn about Luigi Mangione, aka the alleged adjuster, the more we learn about his history with chronic back pain. See, when I was 20, I coughed on a Sunday morning and I blew out my L4, L5 disc, aka herniating the fuck out of it. To make a very, very long story short, over the past 12 years since that happened, I have had countless medical interventions specifically for my back and diagnoses specifically about my back, more than I can count. This, of course, includes surgery. And look what happened to me. I'm a queer, non-binary, social worker, socialist, leftist, progressive, whatever you want to call it, covered in tattoos. Like, what? How'd this happen? I'm just kidding. I just thought that was a funny joke. But all things aside, and to be completely serious, back pain and chronic pain that is intractable, unmanageable, is going to drive any person on this planet Absolutely bonkers. Ironically enough, Luigi is 26 and I got back surgery when I was exactly that age. See, here's the funny thing though. When you're 26, you get kicked off your parents' health insurance if they allow you to stay on it, which most people do, I think, nowadays. And yeah, I was scheduled for a back surgery that I desperately needed because I had neuropathy in my left leg. I actually was using a cane and could not, at my dorsal flex, so like when your foot goes up, right? Like when you're on like pedals for a car, it just wouldn't. I couldn't feel my foot. And because I was denied access to my parents' insurance, and because that shifted when I was 26 at the same time that I was preparing to get back surgery, right before I got my surgery, they called me, I think it was 2 days before, and said, yeah, we can't do your surgery. We're canceling it because your insurance is not accepted at the surgery center that we scheduled you to get surgery at. And they said goodbye. From there, I cried a lot and called my mom, and I don't know what she said or who she said what to, but we figured out a way. We went to a different hospital that did actually take my insurance, and the surgeon was kind enough to, go over there. Anyway, I was slated at 26 to get back surgery so that I would not get permanent nerve damage in my left leg and foot. And because insurance denied that and then postponed it, and we battled back and forth a lot with, if a 26-year-old needs back surgery, I have permanent nerve damage. I can't feel certain parts of my leg. I can't feel certain parts of my foot. That leg, I call it like my bad leg because it's just weaker. The strength in my muscles just never really came back. And I still, of course, have pain. I still have sciatica. I still have neuropathy pain. And it is likely never going to go away unless we have some kind of crazy medical advancement in technology, or I become a head in a jar on a Roomba, like Futurama style, but on a Roomba. I'm going to be in pain. And that is my life. And it's exhausting. And to be in this kind of pain while also fighting with an insurance company is one of the most impossible tasks that we are unfortunately faced with if you have this as your life constellation. The amount of times I have been in severe, 10 out of 10 pain and had to fight with insurance companies or providers just to get an x-ray so I could then get an MRI or get epidural steroid injections or get an oral steroid pack or, do physical therapy. Oh my God, the physical therapy. I can't. It has been one of the most treacherous journeys that I could imagine myself ever having to go through. And the only way I got through it was support from my family. And that required a lot from them. Not everyone has that. Most people don't have that. And back to my original point, back pain, regardless of what resources you have, regardless of where you fall socioeconomically, it's going to radicalize you.
United Healthcare CEO. Without even getting into the morality of it, I hope it activated something in the brains of all the other CEOs and of the healthcare world in general. Example I always bring out, guys, is whenever I go to my dentist have been telling me to take off my wisdom teeth. This is a few $1,000 expense. And I always go back to my Italian doctor. He tells me that I'm fine. I see here in America as being treated as a customer, and in Italy I'm being treated as a patient. Morality of medicine, which then becomes less moral as corporations work directly with the clinics. The second thing that I hope will be addressed, and this is more on a political level, is the health of Americans when it comes to the baseline health. Americans spend a lot because they abuse of the healthcare system because you guys do not have a healthy lifestyle. Why do people that cannot eat gluten go to Italy and then they can eat gluten? Because our quality of food is different than yours. It's glyphosites and all of that stuff. I really hope that the Department of Health, this has been one of the main campaign, points comments of the Orange Man. I hope they will address this when it comes to food and the quality of life. Because Italians are 4 times poorer than Americans. We use the healthcare system 4 times less. We spend 4 times less in healthcare. Same exact reason, because we don't use it. We live 7 years more. Yeah, I hope that all of this will lead to some changes in American society. But I will always remind you guys that you are responsible for what companies sell to you, because if you don't buy it, those companies will not sell it. Anyway, let me know what you think.
So here's the state of American healthcare today. I'm a cardiologist, and a patient was referred to me for a cardiology procedure because, well, they need the procedure. Now, before we can schedule it, we have to get approval from the insurance company, which often requires a prior authorization. So for that, we submit all the information to the insurance company and await their decision whether it's approved. Of course, as it frequently happens, it was not approved, and they're requesting more information. So we submit more data. Several days later, they come back and say, nope, still not approved. So they are requiring a peer-to-peer, which means that I get on a phone call with a doctor who's employed by the insurance company. So then we have to schedule the peer-to-peer. So my staff gets on the phone, day 1, day 2, day 3, an hour plus on hold each time until they finally get through. And then they schedule a phone call, which is scheduled at the end of the week. They give you the time, and I got to carve out time in my schedule in the middle of the day so I can speak to this doctor. Mind you, this process has now taken almost 2 weeks. And at the end of the day, it's probably still going to be denied.
I believe the United Healthcare Luigi Mangione case has the potential to really culturally shift a lot of aspects of our country and be something that is studied for years to come. We more and more are starting to wonder and believe that he did not act alone and that he intentionally got arrested. And if we were to put those pieces together, to me, that says he was hand-selected to be the face of this message, of this movement. And what does that make me think of? Well, it makes me think of the Montgomery bus boycott. Rosa Parks was hand-selected to be the face of the movement. Now, if you've done any research on the civil rights movement, you'll know, beyond the American classroom, you'll know that it was actually Claudette Colvin, a teenager, a pregnant teenager, who refused her seat to get up and give her seat on the bus. And Claudette Colvin, by her own admission, said, I could not have been the face of the movement. She said, I was dark-skinned, I didn't have the right hair texture, and I was a pregnant teenager. Okay. Now, if you are strategizing a publicity campaign, a marketing campaign, you understand, we all do, that the face, the person leading the movement matters. Luigi Mangione fits the profile that you can't argue with. He's white. Because remember, our country decided that Italians were white way back after they were lynching all of them and treating them poorly. They decided to say, okay, Italians, you're white now. So he's white. And I thought it was really funny when someone on TikTok said, oh, if he was brown-skinned, the T word definitely would have been mentioned. Of course it would have been. He has no documented history of mental health needs. And that's another thing our country loves to just say, oh, mental health, as if everyone with mental health would do something like this. No, he's young, he's fit, he's attractive. We all know those things matter in our country. I mean, they even have done polls with the candidate with the most hair is the most likely to win. He's got a good head of hair, okay? He's intelligent. He's not an outlier. He's not a hermit, a recluse. He has friends everywhere. He was well liked. And he's good at social media. So what can they say about him? He came from an affluent family. What can they say about him to discredit him? Because he is the model that they all said we should be following. He is the picture of what they said we should put into roles of leadership, of who should make more money, of who should make decisions, of who should be presidents, CEOs, bosses. He is the template. So now what are they going to argue?
Sorry, but you can't get me to feel bad when shitty things happen to shitty evil people. Like, while under that CEO's leadership, they deployed an AI model that had a 90% error rate to automatically deny healthcare claims from people who all had families of their own that are sick, dying, and poor. Trying to get life-saving treatment, 90% error rate, and they knew how flawed the system was and kept up with it because they don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't even give a fuck about him. The meeting was at 8 a.m. and they resumed the meeting after they found out he was murked on the street. They continued business as usual. Yeah, that motherfucker chose to be in his position of CEO knowing that he had millions of Americans' lives in his hands every single day and decided that the profit, like whatever they were paying him, was enough to have that on his mental every single day. He didn't give a fuck. He does not give a fuck. Two wrongs don't make a right, blah, 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 blah. His stack of bodies is 1,000,000 times higher than the one singular hitman. You're seriously gonna look me in the face and say, well, he had a family. So did the thousands of people that he said, oh, I actually don't care if you live or die or become broke and go into thousands of dollars of debt because I am rejecting your claim. He would literally take the money that he saved on letting you pass away and take his family on like a nice vacation. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean? How many families lost a loved one because they couldn't afford the life-saving treatment that they needed? How many? Thousands, yeah. So there's no sympathy for any of those people, but we're supposed to feel bad for him? Like, I'm so confused. You pick and choose? Another thing to be noted, there was literally a woman running out of the hotel at the exact same distance to the hitman as Brian was, and the man completely let her go. It was a targeted attack. I don't believe he's a flight risk. I'm walking around the streets and I'm not scared for my life because I don't profit off of people's pain and suffering. And he chose that position. I don't know what you want me to say. I don't know why you want me to sit here and cry about it. I'm crying for the people that lost family members because of him. So